The breaking point. The Meridian Research Station shuddered as another tremor rippled through its foundations. Warning lights painted the control room in an angry red glow, while monitoring systems screamed their urgent alerts. Commander Sarah Chen gripped her console, dark eyes fixed on the stream of incoming data that spelled out their impending doom. "Station integrity at 43% and falling," announced Dr. Marcus Wong, his usually steady voice tight with tension. "The magma chamber beneath us is becoming critically unstable." Through the reinforced observation windows, the landscape of Helios 9 stretched out like a vision of hell itself. Rivers of molten rock carved new paths across the black volcanic plains, while geysers of superheated steam burst from widening fissures. The planet was quite literally tearing itself apart. High above the station, the Zenith Collective's observation vessel maintained its vigilant watch. The crystalline ship's organic curves stood in stark contrast to the utilitarian human construction below. Inside, Senior Observer X742 studied the unfolding situation with growing concern. "Your assessment?" they asked their junior colleague, X115. "The humans' continued presence defies all logical parameters," X115 responded, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with confusion. "The station's structural integrity is compromised beyond reasonable safety margins. The correct course of action was clearly outlined in the evacuation order we transmitted." Commander Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel, interrupting their discussion. "Zenith vessel, we acknowledge your evacuation order, but we must decline. The climate restoration data we've gathered here is too valuable to abandon." X742's sensory filaments rippled with irritation. "Commander Chen, our analysis indicates total structural failure within 18 standard hours. No data is worth the loss of sentient life." Sarah turned to her chief engineer, Maya Patel, who was already shaking her head at the latest structural analysis. "Maya, talk to me. How long can we hold this together? The primary supports are still holding, but these tremors are getting worse. If we reroute power from non-essential systems and reinforce the main data core, we might buy ourselves some time." "But Commander," Maya hesitated, "the Zenith aren't wrong about the risk." Sarah nodded, facing her crew of 12. They all knew what was at stake. 3 years of research, millions of data points on planetary climate restoration. Information that could help terraform dying worlds, save failing colonies, maybe even help repair some of the damage done to Earth's own climate. "Every member of this crew is free to evacuate," Sarah announced, her voice firm. "The Zenith transport is waiting. I won't order anyone to stay." She paused, looking each crew member in the eye. "But this data could save billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. I'm staying to complete the transfer." Above, X115 watched in bewilderment as not a single human crew member moved toward the evacuation ships. "Senior Observer, I don't understand." "They acknowledge the danger, yet they remain. It's irrational." X742's response carried a note of resignation. "Humans often are. Record everything. Their behavior may provide insights into their species' peculiar decision-making processes." As if punctuating their words, another tremor rocked the station, stronger than the last. Warning klaxons blared as new alerts flooded the system. "Primary cooling system failure in Section C," Maya called out. "Backup systems engaging, but they won't last long in this heat." Sarah was already moving. "Dr. Wong, start the data transfer to the hardened cores. Maya, get a team to Section C. We need those cooling systems online. Everyone else, begin emergency protocols. We've got 18 hours to save 3 years of work. Let's make them count." The emergency lighting cast long shadows as Maya led her engineering team through the cramped maintenance corridors of Section C. The heat was already becoming unbearable, despite their cooling suits. Above them, pipes groaned under the strain of containing superheated coolant. "Chief, we've got multiple fractures forming in the primary coolant loop," reported James Chen, no relation to the commander. His diagnostic tool projected a holographic overlay of the failing system. "Even if we patch them, the whole system could rupture if these tremors get any worse." Maya wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of grime. "We don't need it to last forever, just long enough." She tapped her comm unit. "Commander, we're looking at a cascade failure in the cooling system. Standard repairs won't cut it." In the control room, Sarah's expression remained steady as she processed the news. "What do you need, Maya?" "Permission to do something stupid," came the reply. "We can reroute the secondary life support coolant through the primary systems. It'll burn out both systems eventually, but it might buy us the time we need." Through the observation window of their ship, the Zenith observers' bioluminescence pulsed with alarm as they monitored the humans' communications. "They intend to sacrifice their environmental redundancies," X-115 noted, their patterns shifting to indicate extreme concern. "This violates every safety protocol in the known galaxy." X-742's sensory filaments wavered thoughtfully. "Indeed, yet they appear to be calculating these risks with full awareness of the consequences." Back in the control room, Dr. Wong looked up from his console. "Commander, if they reroute life support cooling, we lose our safety margin. If anything else fails—" "We all knew the risks when we stayed," Sarah interrupted. She keyed her comm. "Do it, Maya, but work fast." The next hours became a blur of constant adjustments and emergency repairs. The human crew moved with practiced efficiency, even as the station's condition deteriorated around them. They traded jokes to keep their spirits up, shared precious water rations, and worked through exhaustion. The Zenith observers watched it all, their initial dismissal of human irrationality slowly giving way to something approaching fascination. These humans were not simply ignoring logic. They were operating under a different kind of logic entirely, one that placed potential future benefits above immediate personal safety. Against all logic. The ground trembled with increasing violence as Helios 9 entered what Dr. Wong had dubbed the terminal phase of its current volcanic cycle. In the primary data core, Sarah and Marcus worked feverishly to protect the precious climate data as transfer rates crawled forward. 14% transferred, Marcus reported, his voice hoarse from the increasingly toxic air seeping through the station's stressed environmental systems. "But we're losing storage units faster than predicted. The heat is corrupting them." Sarah pulled apart another failed storage unit, her fingers blistered despite her protective gloves. "Keep cycling them through. We can't lose this data, Marcus. This is everything we learned about reversing atmospheric collapse, about rebuilding failing ecosystems. Planets like New Mars are counting on us." Above them, the Zenith ship's sensors recorded everything. X-115 had begun compiling what they termed a catalog of human inefficiencies, though their tone had shifted from dismissal to intense curiosity. They persist in manual data transfer procedures despite clearly showing signs of physical deterioration, they noted. Yet their error rate remained surprisingly low. X-742 had grown unusually quiet, their patterns suggesting deep thought. Perhaps what we perceive as inefficiency serves some purpose we have yet to understand. Another storage unit failed with a sharp crack, its circuits literally melting from the heat. Sarah bit back a curse as she yanked it from the array, her movements growing sluggish from exhaustion. They'd been at this for 10 hours straight, and the station's condition was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. "Commander," Maya's voice crackled over the comm. "We've got a new problem. The coolant bypass is starting to fail, and we're seeing structural damage in the main support pylons. We're looking at maybe 4 hours before total collapse, not 8 like we thought." In their observation vessel, the Zenith monitors recorded a sudden spike in human stress indicators. X-115's patterns shifted to deep indigo, their species' expression of concern. By all known parameters, this should be the moment they abandon their effort. They noted. The risk-reward calculations no longer support continuing. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, Sarah's voice came over the comm with renewed intensity. New plan. Maya, forget the bypass. Strip every cooling unit we've got left and bring them to the data core. Marcus, start pulling non-essential memory from every system on the station. We're going to need the extra storage capacity. That will leave most of the station without environmental controls. Maya protested. We'll be working in near-vacuum conditions in some sections. Then we work in suits, Sarah replied. 4 hours is enough time. We can do this. X-742 observed the flurry of activity that followed with growing fascination. The humans moved with practiced coordination, but it was more than that. There was something almost artistic in their controlled desperation, a kind of beauty in their refusal to yield to seemingly impossible odds. Notice how they adapt their strategies. X-742 commented. They do not simply persist mindlessly. They evolve their approach as conditions worsen. Below, the human crew demonstrated this observation in real time. When standard data transfer protocols proved too slow, they began parallel processing across multiple systems. When heat made the central corridors impassable, they cut through maintenance shafts. Every setback was met not with resignation but with fierce innovation. The human factor. 13 hours into what the Zenith had declared a hopeless endeavor, Maya Patel found herself hanging upside down in a maintenance shaft, trying to splice together cooling systems that were never meant to connect. Her suit's temperature warning blinked an angry red, but she ignored it. A little more. Got it. The jerry-rigged connection held, bringing precious coolant to another bank of data cores. Marcus, how's the transfer looking now? In the core room, Marcus checked his readings through blurry eyes. 78%. We're getting there, but these last sections contain the most crucial data. The atmospheric stabilization formulas and the ecosystem reconstruction protocols. The station groaned ominously around them. Support beams that had held for 3 years against Helios 9's brutal conditions were finally reaching their breaking point. In the control room, Sarah monitored the structural integrity feeds with growing concern. Through it all, the Zenith observers had maintained their vigil. But their clinical detachment had given way to something else, a growing respect tinged with bewilderment. I have been analyzing their behavior patterns, X-115 reported, their luminescence pulsing with excitement. There is a fascinating correlation between increased environmental stress and enhanced problem-solving capabilities. It's as if the humans become more efficient precisely when logic dictates they should be failing. X-742 had long since abandoned their attempt to categorize human behavior according to standard Zenith protocols. Perhaps, they muse, we have been measuring efficiency by the wrong metrics entirely. A violent tremor rocked the station, stronger than any before. Warning sirens blared as entire sections began to decompress. Sarah watched in horror as the structural integrity display showed massive failures cascading through the station's eastern wing. Maya, James, get out of there now, she shouted into the comm. The whole section is going. Maya's voice came back broken and static-filled. Almost. Got it. James, finish that connection. I'll. Her transmission cut off as another tremor hit. In their observation vessel, the Zenith monitor's bioluminescence flared with alarm. They must evacuate, X-115 insisted. Our scans indicate total structural failure is imminent. They cannot. They stopped, patterns shifting to indicate surprise as they watched the sensor feeds. Instead of retreating, 3 more human crew members were suiting up and heading toward the failing section. Sarah's voice crackled over their monitoring systems. Maya, James, hold position. Backup is coming. Everyone else, lock down your stations and redirect all remaining power to the data cores. Fascinating, X-742 murmured. They're protecting their own while simultaneously pursuing their objective. The efficiency should suffer, and yet. Below, the human crew demonstrated a level of coordination that seemed to defy their exhausted state. 3 hours of breathable atmosphere remained in the station, and the temperature in most sections had risen past the survival threshold for unprotected human tissue. Yet they moved with purpose, each person anticipating the needs of others, working together like components of a single organism. Calculated chaos. Time seemed to blur as the station entered its final hours. The Zenith observers had long since abandoned their formal documentation protocols, too engrossed in the display of human tenacity before them. What had begun as a scientific observation of human limitations had become something else entirely. They're recycling their own suit oxygen, X-115 noted with astonishment. Sharing resources that should be conserved for individual survival. It defies all rational protocols for emergency situations. Maya and her team had finally emerged from the damaged section, their suits scorched and damaged, but their mission accomplished. The jury-rigged cooling system they'd installed was holding. Barely. In the data core, Marcus worked through his exhaustion, his fingers flying over the controls as he fought to save every precious byte of data. 93%, he reported, his voice barely a whisper. But the final sections are corrupted. The heat. It's too much for the storage units. Sarah looked at the remaining storage units, then at her own neural interface implant, standard issue for station commanders, containing a quantum storage array meant to preserve crucial command codes and emergency protocols. A crazy idea began to form. Marcus, she said slowly, my neural interface has about 2 petabytes of secure storage. His eyes widened as he understood. Commander, no. The heat levels in here, interfacing directly with the system, could cook your brain. We can't. We can, she cut him off. And we will. Start the transfer. Above, the Zenith observers watched in stunned silence as Sarah Chen connected her neural interface directly to the data core. Their sensors recorded the dangerous rise in her core temperature, the strain on her nervous system, the way her hands shook as she fought to remain conscious through the transfer. This, Arcs 115's patterns fluctuated wildly. This goes beyond mere persistence, beyond anything we classified as rational behavior, and yet they are succeeding. X-742 finished. Perhaps we need to redefine our understanding of rationality. Worth the price. The final hour arrived with a symphony of failing systems. The station's superstructure screamed as metal twisted and thermal plates buckled. Emergency bulkheads slammed down throughout the facility, trying to contain the spreading destruction. Through it all, Commander Sarah Chen remained connected to the data core, her face pale and drawn as information poured through her neural interface. 98%, Marcus reported, his voice tight with concern as he monitored both the data transfer and Sarah's vital signs. Commander, your core temperature is reaching critical levels. Sarah's response came through gritted teeth. Keep going. Almost there. In their observation vessel, the Zenith monitors had fallen into stunned silence. Their sensors recorded everything. The commander's dangerously elevated brain activity, the strain on her nervous system, the way her crew worked desperately to protect her even as the station crumbled around them. This is beyond behavioral analysis, Rex 115 whispered, their patterns shifting through colors never before recorded in their emotional spectrum. They're not just surviving. They're not just persisting. They're transcending. X-742 finished. Every limitation we thought we understood about their species. They're proving us wrong. The station shuddered violently. Maya's voice cut through the chaos. Commander, we've got complete structural failure in sectors 7 through 12. We need to evacuate. Now. But Sarah remained focused on the transfer, even as blood began to trickle from her nose. 99.3%, she mumbled. Cannot lose this data. Too many, depending on us. The Zenith observers watched as her crew made their choice. Instead of retreating, they formed a protective circle around their commander and the precious data core. Maya's engineering team braced failing support beams with their own bodies, The medical staff administered emergency treatments through her suit. Everyone had a role. Everyone understood the stakes. Final transfer initiating, Marcus announced. His hands were steady even as tears streamed down his face. Just hold on, Commander. Hold on. In that moment, HFY-742 made an unprecedented decision. The Zenith ship descended from its observation position, extending its advanced shield technology around the failing human station. It wouldn't last long. Even their superior technology couldn't withstand Helios 9's fury indefinitely. But it didn't need to. Transfer complete. Marcus's cry of triumph was almost lost in the station's death throes. We did it. All data secured. The evacuation that followed was a blur of organized chaos. The human crew moved with their last reserves of strength, carrying their unconscious commander to safety. The Zenith ship's medical bay, never before used for human patients, was quickly adapted to treat severe neural trauma and heat exposure. Hours later, as the remnants of Meridian Station disappeared into Helios 9's molten surface, Sarah Chen opened her eyes in the Zenith medical bay. Her first words were barely a whisper. The data, did we? Safe, Maya assured her, squeezing her hand. Every bite. Enough to save dozens of worlds. In the observation room, HFY-742 and HFY-115 compiled their final report to the Zenith Collective. The traditional format seemed inadequate to capture what they had witnessed. How do we quantify this? HFY-115 wondered. How do we explain to the collective that everything we believed about efficiency, about rational behavior, about the limits of sentient persistence? We tell them the truth, HFY-742 replied. We tell them that we have been measuring the wrong things, that there are forms of logic we had never imagined, that sometimes the most rational choice is to defy rationality itself. They paused, their patterns settling into the deep blue of profound realization. And we tell them that perhaps it is time for the Zenith Collective to learn from humanity, rather than merely studying them. As their ship set course for Zenith space, carrying both the precious climate data and its even more precious human cargo, the observers knew they had witnessed something that would change their civilization's understanding forever. The humans hadn't just saved their research. They had demonstrated that the true measure of advancement wasn't in calculating the odds, but in choosing to defeat them. In the medical bay, Sarah Chen drifted back to sleep, surrounded by her exhausted but triumphant crew. They had paid a price for their determination. In blood, in pain, in years stripped from their lives by radiation and neural strain. But as the first transmissions arrived from New Mars, reporting successful implementation of their atmospheric stabilization protocols, not one of them doubted it had been worth it.